Stas, welcome to the GTM Pack podcast. Awesome to have you on.
Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. Well, we had you on this panel a couple of weeks ago, this product marketing masterclass, and I thought your session and your insights on product marketing as it specifically pertains to technical audiences and security, and some of your thoughts as well on AI and security around AI were so interesting. And I know the audience really was fascinated by it. So I really, thought we had to have you on here and share this with the broader community here. So again, thanks so much for being on, and really excited to dig in with you. But before we do that, why don't you, for those that aren't familiar with you, why don't you give a little bit of a background on your career journey and how you got to where you are today leading Akamai's API security platform, product marketing for the platform.
Sure. Again, well, first of all, thank you for having me. It's super excited to have a conversation with you. But I started my career actually in consulting. I went, did consulting, security, cybersecurity consulting, and then we went into more of an industry, again, focusing on the compliance aspect, sort of reporting to CIOs and so on. But I got to the level where I learned everything about the compliance portion, but not much about the business. So natural step was, of course, to go get an MBA. And post MBA, you only sort of have a few different avenues to explore. It could be go back to the consulting, could be product, but product marketing was actually very interesting to me. So I joined a very small team at HP. And we launched something that most of you probably will be familiar with, which is like a Microsoft Surface, where it's like a 2-in-1, where you remove the keyboard and now you have a tablet. So that was one of the cool products that I worked on at HP. And then from there, I went to again work for even larger company, AWS. And AWS was incredible because you get to learn the scale. And from there, I started my startup journey. So I wanted something small. And so I joined a series of startups and they kept getting acquired. So after a few acquisitions, I ended up with another very large company, CyberArk, a phenomenal company. And from there, once again, joined a small startup that once again just got acquired. So I'm back in the very, very large company, 10,000 people. So I guess, the great thing is that I've seen the scale, I've seen how you do things on the shoestring budget. And I'm excited to share sort of my knowledge.
Yeah, what a background. I mean, what's interesting is I actually have met a couple of product marketers that have come from a consulting background. I wonder your thoughts actually on that. The skill set, it seems like definitely like the critical thinking, product management, collaboration. What are some skills that you learned from that experience that have helped you as a product marketer?
So I think consulting is phenomenal because I firmly believe that, as a starting point in a career, that's probably the best you can get because you essentially get parachuted into the company with, some difficult challenges, and you have very finite amount of time to figure out what is happening, how do we resolve it, and you never really see it through all the way. You generally get moved to the next project, which is the downside. But the upside is, just being able to quickly execute, figure out the right relationships, get the right data, put in the sort of structured framework of how you're going to address it, and then educate or enable folks that are there on the ground within the company on how to actually execute the project. So I think those skills, the communication, the ability to get people in a room to articulate sort of the problem statements and the value and the solutions, that all translates really well into product marketing, where you're sort of in the middle. Like you work with product, you work with sales, you obviously integrated with the operations and broader marketing. So you're kind of in the center of everything.
Yeah, very cool. And you also mentioned, obviously startups, larger companies, hardware in there, software, security.
Yeah.
So really, really interesting background. I wanted to dig into security specifically and technical audiences. It's something that I've always been fascinated with from a marketing standpoint. I've never had the privilege of marketing to a very technical audience. But what I know of it is, they tend to be a very, first of all, knowledgeable audience when it comes to
True.
technical products and the bits and bytes and all the stuff in the weeds there. But they're also a skeptical audience when it comes to marketing and sales. So I'm curious from your experience, what's some advice or what's some keys to success that you found when it comes to marketing to an audience that is both skeptical of marketing in general and sales in general, but also, very technical, very knowledgeable as well.
Yeah, so I think that there are a few lessons learned, and again, my experience has been in security space, but that's the lens that I'm going to take. But I genuinely believe that it's actually applicable to most industry, not just technical. But I think what you mentioned is like the more technical your audience is, the less they have tolerance for fluff. So for example, like developers, developers and marketers, go together. Like I don't know, country music and EDM, they don't go together, right? So in my experience, you skip the buzzwords, you skip the hyperboles and all the flowery language, and just focus on sort of facts and real problems. And by the way, like this, focusing, understanding customer pain points and challenges is just super important. Like the mindset, at least again in security, should be, let me help you, right? Not let me sell you something, like let me help you, right? And then be very specific about the problem, how you solve it, why it matters in the context of these like real world challenges that audiences, faces. And, I think that would get you far. And maybe another obvious point is that, you got to get the technical aspects right. And I think this is where some of the non-technical PMMs that make that transition into, tech companies maybe struggle a little bit, or struggle to connect with the audience, because, any sort of like inaccurate claims or statements that miss that nuance that is very relevant to the audience can like just like torpedo your credibility. And I'm like particularly paranoid about this. So, if let's say you have less than a year, with the product, I would go and validate everything that you write with like either product team or SEs. And honestly, it could be just, a little bit more annoying to go into, product and be like, hey, double check, this is valid, this is correct. But the upside, is huge. And like I see so much of this right now with the AI stuff that we talked about, because folks is throwing AI terms around. Like, a few years ago, they were doing with, what was it? Next gen. Everything, a few years ago was next gen and X gen, and, the next gen platform and next gen this, right? And then there was zero trust, right? And everything in security was zero trust. But I think, it's actually kind of worse now. So, if folks feel like if you don't put AI something in whatever you write, like that's it, it's not good enough, which is, of course, is crazy. And by the way, kind of like a pro tip to anyone who's starting, sort of in technical teams and technical product marketing, especially in large companies, if the company has ever submitted one of those analyst report responses, like Gartner has Magic Quadrants, Forrester has Waves, GigaOM has radars, and so on. But anyway, if you can get your hands on last year's submission, like the actual 200 questionnaire and the answers that were provided, it's like clip notes to your product. It's better than going and reading documentation. It's way better than trying to read some blogs. Like this will get you no fluff, direct information about the product, and then you have more confidence when you are talking to your audience or presenting and just having a seat at the table. And maybe there's actually one more thing that I will mention, which is proof of like a validation, especially from third parties, because I mentioned analysts. Like, so analysts or customer stories or technical demos, like whatever you got, or like always use it. And again, like try not to sell, try to inform. Like you're not the hero of the story. I think, like you are the trusted partner that can make someone's like, I will make your Mr. CIO life easier. And this is how I'm going to do it. And I have receipts to prove it. So
Yeah,
I think fascinating. It's credibility.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I mean, that trust part of it, both in terms of the accuracy of the technical acumen that you're using in your content, but also the third-party validation that you mentioned from Gartner and these. It seems like trust. I think trust in general in any sort of big purchase is really important, but from a skeptical and highly informed audience, it comes into play even more. So You mentioned a couple of these things like Gartner and so on, but I was curious to ask about like the channels that are unique to say a technical, and in your case, maybe even a security audience that might be different from. I'm marketing a MarTech, a sales and marketing tech product, right? So for me, it's like LinkedIn is the place to be. That's where everybody is, right? And there's certain Dreamforce and HubSpot inbound. There's certain conferences that we attend and so on. But what does it look like in the security world in terms of channels to reach this type of an audience?
Yeah, so I think that can be again a very tricky because like the tactics and channels like really gotta correspond to sort of how your audience behaves, how they buy, where they get information. It like again for super hands-on and super technical people, like they will 100% be skipping your gated blog or that has only like some sort of high level information, and they will 99% of the time ignore your highly polished marketing email. But if you have a developer portal with all the use cases laid out, and some examples like code examples and a free trial for them to actually try it on and experience themselves, like, well, you'll get some extra Christmas cards that year. And I think again, when it comes to technical buyers, just sort of avoiding generic content and focusing on content depth, right? Like I think I noticed it again, coming back a little bit to AI, is that it made our life so much easier. Like marketers' life is so much easier. So what I see is this massive increase in volume, but massive decrease in substance. Right?
Yeah.
And that is way tricky, right? So when you're marketing to technical audience, I would say, try to put together good white papers, some threat research, some sort of deep dives that will resonate. High level blogs that just get pumped out with a few lazy prompts are not going to cut it. And analysts do play a massive role. So if you're asking me like what works really, really well, in very large companies, very large tech companies, the audience, like this, the buying suite, the CISOs and CIOs, essentially what they do is that they go to the analyst and then they say, hey, Mr. Analyst, we have a problem. Who should we talk to? Or they just, pull up the, magic quadrant, look in the top right and say, all right, these three companies that are at the top, we're just going to send an RFP. But smaller companies will also pay attention to peer validation, like Gartner Peer Insights and some other kind of aggregators of reviews. And I think again I touched on this, but what works is when you can show how your product actually solves the problem. So demos or webinars that go into technical details or mapping what you do to security frameworks that companies are utilizing. All of that works super well to connect with the audience and skip the fluff and really give them the details that they need.
What about from a competitive positioning perspective? So again, I come from the world of MarTech and sales tech, and we've got like the competitive positioning docs or pages on your site where you do side-by-side comparisons. You've got the battle cards that you give the sales reps. From our perspective, obviously they touch on the high level value differentiation and stuff like that. But I'd imagine for a technical audience, you'd have to get deeper into the weeds. How do you approach competitive positioning and differentiation and competitive enablement, even of a sales team that's selling to this audience?
That's a great question. So you'll be actually very surprised by my answer, but I honestly believe that if you go feature by feature, right, security feature by feature, that's actually a bad idea, right? And because one release later, a month later, your competitor will be able to catch up, and then sort of like your battle card, whatever you put together, is actually not relevant anymore. So what I actually try to elevate are the differentiators and why we do things in either a better way or how we can help customers achieve their strategic outcomes. And you just have to be very honest about the trade-offs. Like the technical audience will, if you say that you're the best at everything, right? And you have those Harvey balls, and every single one in the lines, like you have 100%, and everybody else, zero. They'll sniff it right out. They will just say, okay, come on, like let's be real. This is bad, right? So I think being honest about what your approach is, why it's better, and how you can help is probably the best way. And I will actually give you a great example where I had to go 180 on some of the claims. So just recent startup, that before being here at Akamai, the startup was sort of a pure play solution, right? We solve a problem and we solve it great and we do a really good job at it. So what I was emphasizing, we were putting together these enablement for how we're going to go to or how we're going to treat our competitors. I was emphasizing the fact that we are vendor agnostic, that we're super innovative, and that we move so fast, and we're like agile, and we can respond to customer requests and so on. And of course, the competitors were these large platforms, and they only worked well with their own tools, and they were super slow, and they had some complex requirements for integrations, or like licensing wasn't flexible, and so on. And then sort of the startup gets acquired, and now I'm part of this large company. So that tune changes real quick, right? So what am I focused on? Well, you can focus on scalability and support, right? And, ability to, provide defense in depth, because, pure play solutions can only provide, a solution for that one problem. But now that you're part of a bigger problem, you can sort of stack your different capabilities and integrate them together to provide that defense depth and a layered approach. So, it's individual capabilities, but acknowledging the strength, understanding broader context of the market, like having a vision for where your product is going to be super important. And when we do enablement, all we focus, like for example, for every release, one of the things that we do, we have this, product release office hours, let's call them that, where we focus specifically just on the benefits to the customers. We don't barely cover, how it works, or like, which knobs you need to twist and which code you need to put to get it to work. We do show it, this is what it looks like, this is within the product. But the main focus is, why does the customer care, right? And how are we doing this better? Again, not going, feature by feature, but more, hey, this is a broader thing. We're going to address the problem. We're going to do it. We're going to help customer in a certain way.
Yeah, it's super interesting. It's in some ways similar to the core principles, right, that you just have in product marketing in any organization. Obviously, there is that trust layer, slightly different channels in terms of, you mentioned the emphasis on the analysts, but in the end, it is about the benefits, right? And even though it's a technical audience that knows more about the individual features and the technical aspects, it all comes down to the value and the benefits that they're going to get at the end of the day, and still focusing on that is really important. What about in terms of your sort of adjacent stakeholders within a company, right? So you're the product marketer. Obviously, I think product is a stakeholder that you're going to be working very closely with, sales as well. But are there any differences in a security organization of other teams or parts of the organization that you're collaborating with as well, and any differences in the feedback loops and the way that you work with these teams versus, let's say, like, again, a MarTech company?
Yeah, so I'm not sure about MarTech, but I think it's not really unique. Like marketing acts still, as a sort of this connective tissue, right? So we've helped translate technical capabilities into customer value, and we can only do that if we're really connected to the product and to sales, right? So that means I sit on like product pre-versions or whatever we call them, like sprint reviews or whatnot, or you have to kind of listen to sales and hear hey, what are they hearing on the front lines, both in terms of like the innovation that happens, at maybe our competitors, or customer pain points. And then, that sales feedback that I work or that I hear sort of fuels, any sort of refinements to the messaging. So when a seller tells me, oh, hey, this, you put together a deck, you put together a presentation, really doesn't land, right? The customers are confused. That's actually gold for me, right? So because, a lot of times as PMMs, you sort of sit in this ivory tower and you don't necessarily, unless it's an event like an RSA, get to frequently talk to the customers themselves versus sellers who are talking every single day. That's all they do.
Yeah.
So, sort of having these feedback channels, whether someone sends you like a Slack, or you have office hours where you're constantly being updated on works, what doesn't, what's missing, that really helps. The other aspect I want to say is product roadmap, right? And working closely with PMs to first understand where their head is at, what are they building, and also giving them the feedback in terms of emerging customer needs or what you see, analysts are asking for, or maybe competitive shifts, sale, gaps that sales are seeing, stuff like that actually feeding into the PMs, because PMs themselves, yes, they are on customer calls, but that's usually when something is broken, right? Something is clearly not working, and then it's escalated to, sort of PMs to go in and save the day, because, ultimately they're the heroes here. But, day to day, I think PMMs have way more visibility into what happens, at sales, what works, what doesn't. And then I would say finally, maybe, that feedback loop is sharing wins and losses, right? So kind of figure out why do you win, and celebrate the wins, and really kind of try to, figure out and why you lose as well, right? So what did we learn from that loss, how we can avoid it? I think that's sort of, at least in my opinion, in technical, PMMs teams, we're in the middle and kind of getting that constant feedback in and out to various teams that we interact with.
Awesome. I want to ask you a little bit of a different question now. And this is coming from, our audience. A lot of them are product marketers that are focused on sales enablement. And, one part of the sales process, especially if you're selling enterprise software, is security reviews, right? And you are a product marketer that comes from a very unique perspective, that you live in the mind of the security team. Obviously, you're selling security solutions to them, but I'm wondering if you have any advice for a product marketer. They don't have to be selling a security product. It could be any software product, but that, is looking to support their sales team through this process, through this security review process, and how they can best support them and enable them in sort of like addressing the concerns or the needs of this security audience. In this case, reviewing, new products that they're bringing into the organization.
Yeah, so I think it's definitely different for security products themselves, because that's actually security teams is our champion. So we a lot of times we just focus on sort of like being secure without slowing companies down. But here's what I will say to that. I think from my experience, doesn't matter what product you're selling, if there's a technical review, there's a security review, companies will choose to inconvenience their employees to stay secure. It's like one of those things that company would rather hear someone complain about, having to change their password several times, or more complex login, where it takes several steps for you to do something, or maybe the software being just a little bit slower, versus dealing with a breach. Right. So I think when we enable sales, we actually try to explain how security actually helps. And by the way, this could be, let's think about compliance. Let's think about compliance, right? You put all these controls in, and as a result, you can now pass audits easier. So that technical review is going to take longer, like the sales cycle is going to be longer, because companies need to make sure that they're in compliance. But in the long term, that's actually will benefit the company, because they will easily, be able to demonstrate the, either compliance, or show evidence that they're compliant, to show that their product that they're utilizing from third parties meet the specific requirements, that they're obliged to meet because of the, external regulations. So I think, having just empathy and understanding that, security is there for a reason, and yes, it can introduce some bumps and inconveniences and maybe a little bit of complexity, but it's all for the worthy cause. I think that would be my message.
Yeah, makes total sense. I think one thing that I experienced, so interesting enough, before I was a product marketer, I was a salesperson selling software into an enterprise organization. So I actually have experienced it both from a product marketer perspective, enabling the sales team, and from a sales perspective. And I think once you've gone through a couple of security reviews, yes, every organization has their own flavor of what they need sign off on, or the checkbox to be checked. But being able to sort of keep that documentation, and reuse it and adapt it, having like a base template that you can sort of build off of, I think is really, really important. So that you're not starting from scratch each time. Because as a product marketer and a salesperson, that time kills all deals. And, the longer that security process takes, it's going to take time every time, but the longer it takes, the higher risk there is that something happens, whether it's like a layoff and suddenly your champion is gone, right? Or, a budget cut or a shift in like some sort of priority. So being able to start with a baseline of materials and things that you've been asked for before, I think has been something that I've found to be super valuable.
100%. 100%. If you come in and preemptively answer the questions, or as a PMM, what you can create is these, technical product briefs. Don't make them public. They can be gated. But when you are in the sales process, where now there's a deep technical evaluation, you just being able to whip it out and say, hey, this is all our certifications. Oh, hey, this is exactly, how we store the data, for how long, where it resides. All these technical nitty-gritty things that companies pay attention to. If you can have them ready, set, go, in a document, some sort of PDF, again, product brief, or even a dedicated trust page. That's again, sort of behind the login, because you don't want to announce it to the rest of the world. I think that's going to do wonders in speeding up that process. It's probably going to make someone very happy, where they don't have to like ping you constantly with 25 different questions.
Yeah. So now the AI question, we alluded to this earlier, right? I thought this was just such a fascinating conversation. I'm in the world of startups, so maybe we don't think about this enough, or we're trying to move so quickly, so we don't give as much attention to it. But you were talking about on this panel, the challenges with AI adoption, particularly from a security perspective, and how enterprise organizations are maybe slower to adopting some of these tools because they're still not clear on, how it fares in terms of its security around the data privacy and all that stuff. So I was wondering if you could just share with the audience here a little bit about that. What does AI adoption look like in the enterprise? And from the security perspective, how's this kind of shaking things up, I would imagine, for security professionals?
Yeah.
And if you're a company that, let's say, is selling an AI tool and you're going after the enterprise, or if you're let's say a product marketer that's looking to adopt an AI tool within your organization, and you work for an enterprise, what are some of the considerations that need to come into mind to be able to bring this technology in-house?
Right. So first of all, in terms of, where, you mentioned like, what's holding back enterprise AI adoption, it is not being held back, right? It's actually crazy fast. It's just breakneck speeds. It's just not sanctioned, right? So what you get is individual people, it could be marketers, it could be, your developers, pretty much anyone in organizations can, pull up a website, go in and start trying it out. It's a new shiny thing. It's going to make you more efficient. It's greater. So people definitely try. So maybe sanctioned AI, right? The one that's actually controlled, if that's the difficult conversation. And companies just not quite sure, how to go about this. But in reality, you have a bunch of people just doing stuff. I think I saw this crazy stuff. I could be wrong, but I think it was something like this. Like 75% of respondents said that they would break security protocols just to get the stuff done on time. right? So when you think about AI, people will just throw in, whatever it is, code, your, press releases that are coming up, anything else into these third-party models, right? And that's how you end up with the sensitive info or some source code just floating around. So internet doesn't forget, and ChatGPT definitely does not forget, right? So I think as marketers, I think we need to like lean into those concerns, like not downplay them, right? So actually just being very specific about your solution, like if you're selling the solution, as you mentioned, how it addresses governance, how it addresses shadow AI, how it, where's the audit part, what security it looks like give audience like actual confidence that you're not only solving their problem, which is of course you should do, but you sort of doing it in the right way with proper control. So I wouldn't necessarily like frame security like as this blocker to innovation, like frame it as sort of like enabler. And by the way, what you will see, in just a matter of months, maybe like I would say 12 to 48 or whatever to 24 months, you will see that there's going to be a lot of dedicated companies. Like one that comes to mind is shout out to AIM Security. But there's plenty of others that will actually go into enterprises and help them put guardrails and put controls around how AI is being utilized by these various teams, right? Because honestly, you really cannot protect or secure what you don't know about or you cannot see. So that visibility, I think those companies will start providing companies visibility, and companies in turn will help you sort of put guardrails. So like if you try to put in someone like, hey, let me put my credit card in, see what ChatGPT thinks about that, right? It will actually prevent you from doing it. But as a marketer, if your company, for the most part, will probably not have those controls right now, just use your best judgment. Like try, if you're working on a sensitive release or something sensitive, try to abstract it enough or anonymize it. Don't use actual product names or whatnot, but just to give sort of the help that you need from the model. But then do that final 10% that's really, really valuable. Like just do it yourself, do some legwork. Otherwise, those skills will atrophy anyway. So it's a good thing.
Yeah, totally. I think this is such a new world. As I said before that panel, just to be honest, I wasn't thinking about these things, and you opened up my mind, to all these conversations that are definitely happening within these large organizations, these questions that are being asked. And I think that's really great advice on how to approach it. Well, this has been a fascinating conversation. Like, as I said to you, I've always been interested in marketing to technical audiences and how it differs. So thanks for giving us a look into that world. If folks, are listening to this and they want to follow you, they want to learn more from you out there, what's the best place for them to find you and connect with you?
I think it's LinkedIn, though I'm not, super mega active. So I probably won't post about being super excited about getting the, latest certificate or whatnot. I think, but you definitely, I will promote this podcast. So they definitely can find me on LinkedIn. It's probably the best way to get a hold of me and say hello.
Awesome. Well, again, Stas, thanks for your time today, and have a good day over there.
Thank you so much, Justin. I really appreciate you having me. And to everybody listening, thank you for your time.